Hello, everyone. Welcome to another series of influential employees on social media as part of the Autolytic and Tribal Impact Employee Advocacy content series. And today we're delighted to be joined by Zoe Sands, a social media community lead at Veritas. A very warm welcome to you, Zoe.
Thank you, Tim. Pleasure to be here.
Fantastic. So, would love you to introduce yourself to all of our listeners. Maybe a bit about yourself and your journey on social media. I know that you've been in the motor industry, the IT industry, and obviously you've built up a really impressive social media presence. So, would love to hear the sort of top level summary, and then would love to dive in and interrogate you in terms of how well you've done and how you've got there.
Yeah, be gentle with me. Be gentle.
We promise to be gentle.
We will. Hey, Tim, it sounds like you got a bit of a cold. Have you got a bit of
Oh, yeah, sorry, I don't normally have this croaky voice. I've just
No, I was going to say.
picked up something from my son at nursery. So
Of course, yes, that's how it
yeah.
happens, isn't it? Sorry, Zoe, go on.
No, you're okay, Sarah. So welcome, everyone. I'm Zoe, as Tim introduced. So I've been doing digital for a very long time. If you want to find out the exact date, you can see that on my LinkedIn profile, but it's been a couple of decades and I think we shan't say any more than that. So I have been around for a little while, and I first cut my teeth in sort of digital in the motor industry, as Tim alluded to earlier. And then went into the IT industry, working for companies like Dialogic, Cisco. That's where I got introduced to social and the community aspects. And basically the rest has been history, moving on to other IT vendors like Juniper Networks, and then of course my current role at Veritas Technologies. But yeah, I think social digital is the way forward, and I've thought that ever since the late 90s. So there I am giving you a little bit of a allude into how old I actually am there. But yeah, it's a continuous journey and it's continually changing, and as we know, there are networks popping up all the time, and I think it's really important to stay on the cusp of that, learning and sharing from other people, and that's how we can build better experiences for end users at the end of the day, because that's ultimately who we are communicating to online with our respective businesses that we work for.
And how do you so your journey started so you were obviously using like social media while you were in your cot, Zoe, so you were crawling around with a phone. I've got an amazing picture of my daughter who took her first selfie when she was crawling. She grabbed my phone. I didn't know she had it. She's got this amazing picture of her first selfie. She's only about 18 months old, but
so she's going to be on this in 20 years' time saying the same thing.
Oh yeah, probably, yeah, and she'll have the evidence as well. So it's amazing. So how? Because you've been on social, you were one of the very early adopters, building community way before it became anything that other people have started to do. Zoe, so what social platforms are you on? So where are you active today?
So primarily my primary place is LinkedIn from a business perspective, and then Twitter. I suppose when I first started out, I used to love Twitter. You either love or hate it, and it's gone very much not in the way that I liked it when it first started out. It used to be that sort of community feel to Twitter, and now it's more about fake news, it's more about trolling, that broadcast mechanism out there. And of course, a lot of businesses use it for breaking news, and the news channels do as well. And of course things do evolve. With LinkedIn, that is my primary communication for business at the end of the day, and also where I've built that biggest sort of influence, I would say, if you want to call it that. But I do like Instagram. I love that. We're all sort of like visual aspects, aren't we? We love that visual learning and things like that. And it has its own sort of sub community in there, dependent on what you're interested in. I'm not that big a fan on Facebook, if I'm honest. And I think that comes from what happened with the data exploitation with Cambridge Analytica, and kind of got turned off with that, exploiting users and things like that. So yeah, that's where I am at the moment. I focus on those, and then of course I found a new love, which is Reddit. We can talk about that later on.
What about Clubhouse and TikTok? You over those on those platforms yet?
Yeah, I've dabbled in there, but I really don't have any interest. In all honesty, to be quite honest, I mean, you've got to pick the networks that have most value for you, and those don't have any value for me at the moment.
So I've got two questions, but the first one is, how did you build such a massive audience on LinkedIn? So you've got 69,000 followers on LinkedIn, which is pretty incredible. I don't see people with those kind of numbers. I know that a lot of people are fascinated by, if they've got 2,000, they think, oh, I could never get to Zoe's level. Could you talk through like how you did that, and whether it was something that happened in a specific sort of 12-month period where organic reach was more easy to achieve in LinkedIn, or how did you achieve that?
Yeah, so as I've said, I've always been quite active on LinkedIn. It's always been that network where I've actively gone out to develop those connections. But there is a distinct difference between the followers and the connections I have. So the connections that I have is less than 3,000, and I am very sort of critical in who I am inviting into my network, and that's because I want to protect that network and have value. I'm not going to connect with people that I don't know, that I've not worked with, I've not had any experiences with, because I don't know what the value of that connection is going to be, and it could be a one-sided connection, in all honesty. From the follower perspective, that all kind of started happening, and because I was writing a lot on LinkedIn. And in 2016, I got nominated as one of LinkedIn's top voices. And that's how it basically happened from then. It was like kind of a snowball effect, really, because at the end of the day, LinkedIn is really about creating that content and writing that content and sharing it, rather than just... They want you to be on the platform. So if you are creating that content, effectively creating a blog around your profile, you're going to be more attractive to people that are on the network. And then, of course, you're going to be fooling the algorithm and triggering the algorithm to gain followers.
That's good. Did you have two questions, Tim? What was
the other one was about Reddit. I know that you're keen to talk about that, and and what communities feel. So I'd love to get your perspective on Reddit, but from a personal perspective, but also how businesses can tap into Reddit, because that's a question that I get asked quite a lot, and I think it's going to become more and more important.
Yeah, I think sort of like Reddit has had a resurgence this year, hasn't it, really? It's hit the news big time with Wall Street Bets taking on Melvin Capital. And for those that don't know, that's a hedge fund, a very rich hedge fund. And the retail traders who are in this group that's named Wall Street Bets nearly took down a hedge fund. And basically what the hedge fund was doing was shorting a lot of against businesses to make money themselves. And Wall Street Bets took them on, and instead of going short, they were going long and push stock prices up for like a company called Game, as an example. And that's really a great example as like what the power of the community can have, and how rather than being an individual influencer and what power you have as an individual, the power of a community and the power of people coming together, what they can actually do. And of course, that has a phenomenal impact, and can have a phenomenal impact on businesses, both from a negative perspective and also a positive one. And this negative one, this example with Melvin Capital, is obviously, that could have forced that business to go bust ultimately, with a huge amount of debt and risk associated with that business, because obviously it didn't bet on Wall Street Bets would try to take them down. But I think there is a huge opportunity with communities, both with creating those communities on your own platform, and that obviously takes a long time to do, or finding these specific communities that are out there that are relevant to your particular industry and the industry that I work in is IT, so there are communities like IT Toolbox, Spiceworks, you've got Reddit as well, and it's finding those community elements that are relevant to your business. I mean, there are conversations going on in these sort of almost like chambers. I'm not going to call them echo chambers, because an echo chamber is when somebody's in there just spouting their own broadcast messages, but they're in these chambers and they're influencing others, and they can be potentially influencing buyers as well, rightly or inadvertently wrongly. So it's really important to decide on what your strategy is going to be when it comes to social media. Yes, you've got that broadcast element, and that's very much what social media is moving towards. You know, dare I say it, it's moving away from this sort of community, this conversation, where a lot of businesses are now broadcasting out almost like email. So you really need to have that sort of two-way flow conversation with this community element, and you can use it for ideation, for gaining, even looking at what other people are doing as well, your competitors in those communities, and asking the community at large for feedback as well. On there, it is a frightening place, I'm not going to lie, it isn't, because a lot of this is done under anonymity, and in a lot of communities you have the screen warriors, and so it's not for the faint-hearted or those that are not thick-skinned, as I should say. So you do need to sort of harden up, but you also need to have sort of policies in place and what you going to accept as acceptable behavior. Just as you have your own social media policy, you'll need to integrate a community policy and what you think are the aspects that are acceptable, and sort of like the boundaries of the community is what I'm trying to say there.
It's an interesting one, Reddit, because it's come up with in the US. I think a lot of people use it a lot, maybe more than over here. But, for my antisocial husband, antisocial media, he's all over Reddit. He loves it. It's a community that he's found his place, I think. And there's lots of DevOps people in there. And a customer of ours who were doing some social media monitoring, they, when they looked at this, they thought all the conversations might be happening on LinkedIn, but actually they were all happening on Reddit. So it is bubbling up. It's quite an interesting one, isn't it? Have you had much experience, Tim, with Reddit then?
No, I haven't. I was actually thinking 2007 I was in San Francisco and I visited the Dig offices, your DIGG.
Yeah.
Back when we used to talk about social bookmarking sites like Dig and Reddit and stuff like that.
Stumble upon.
And actually I don't know what happened to Dig. Maybe it went bust, or maybe I just haven't talked about it. But Reddit's the only one that seems to be really current and has sort of stayed the course. So I don't know too much about it, apart from when we're doing social listening and insights work, to see some of the links that people are sharing, from Reddit. And obviously, so we always talk about where the communities are, where your audience is, and it's it's fascinating to see whether it's on Reddit or Clubhouse or Twitter Spaces or LinkedIn or Twitter or Facebook groups, because I guess what you're saying, Zoe, is the groups and the community thing. People were talking about LinkedIn groups, and then Facebook groups seem to perform a lot better than LinkedIn groups, and then we're talking about Reddit community, and so I think this kind of social place where communities pop up and are driving value for individuals and brands seems to be changing and evolving so quickly. I mean, Clubhouse, there are good communities there, but maybe it's Reddit, maybe it's I mean, one of our investors is trying to recreate Bebo and has done a couple of times, from the initial social networking sites. So there's lots of new social networks popping up to try and build communities. Yeah. And it's really difficult from a brand and from a personal standpoint to keep abreast of it.
Yes, yeah, and it's sort of like you're having to continually keep up with the latest trends and finding out where your user base is really at the end of the day, because the social networks, they all go through fads, don't they, and fashions and everything else like that, and all the cool people move on to the next latest thing and then leave the laggards behind on the main networks and things like that. And it's just trying to find where those conversations are. But I think that the most sort of valuable conversations are the ones where people have that anonymity. on those sort of communities, because they're not having things traced back to them, and that can be a good thing, and it also can be a bad thing as well, because we know what happens with that sometimes with those trolling aspects on there. But in communities such as like I've mentioned, Reddit, because that's going to be more open for everybody who's listening on here. The other networks that I mentioned were specifically for IT, so a lot of people may not want to invest in those sorts of networks. But Reddit has topics and groups, boards for anything that you can think of, really. Your wildest thoughts are on Reddit. So I would just say to people, just set up a personal account and just have a look and just lurk there. You don't, just because you create an account doesn't necessarily mean you have to be active on there. When it comes to Reddit, yeah, I'm a member of it, but I'm not active in those boards posting stuff, because I've used my real name on my username because I wanted to grab that. So I'm not active on there because I don't want to say 1 million people coming after me and stuff like that. But yeah, I'm happy to be lurking there, watching, because that's all about learning as well, and bringing those learnings back from the community to other networks as well.
Yeah, I tell you what, I'm inspired actually, because nobody's talked about Reddit on these chats, have they, Tim? I don't think it's the first time it's come up. So
yeah, we mentioned it fleeting, but no one that's really talked about it. It was a passing reference, but yeah, I think you're the first person to feature on it, which is amazing.
Yeah, might have a little look myself now then, over my husband's shoulder.
Have a
lurk on his account. Yeah, just a quick one for you, Zoe, because I want the topics that you're passionate about, because very recently you experienced something, didn't you, on LinkedIn? I'd love you to share that. And if anyone's watching or listening, please put some, comments and questions in. But do you want to share that? Because I think that leads to the topics that you're quite passionate about on social. Do you want to share with the audience what happened?
Yeah. So a month ago, somebody impersonated me on LinkedIn, and that wasn't, just sort of like my name or anything like that. They actually took almost a complete copy of my profile and started reaching out to people and pretending to be me. So obviously that's, quite a shocking thing when you find that out and you do a little search of your name on LinkedIn and 2 profiles come up and you think, what's that all about? And then you dig into it. And of course, somebody set that profile up and then started reaching out to people that I knew and started connecting with them. And, although I do sort of like LinkedIn and I do respect it and things like that, I think there are obligations for the social networks to protect users. I mean, ultimately, they are taking our data and they are using that to make a lot of money. And in return, what are they supplying us with? They're not supplying us with any form of protection whatsoever. They're not doing any verification. This profile was not verified before it was set up. They were using my image, my LinkedIn photo, all the images that I had on LinkedIn. There was no alert on LinkedIn to say, hey, this is a complete copy of somebody else's profile. Should that be flagged up? There's no reason why that cannot be done with the technologies. There's no reason that a photo verification cannot be done. So if somebody's uploading a photo of me, then their face should recognise it and they should have facial recognition on there. And yeah, there is a big responsibility. I think in the UK, our laws are changing. And I don't know if people, are aware of the new online safety legislation that's coming into effect this summer. And it does put a lot of emphasis more on the social networks and how they need to be creating a safe environment for users. Ultimately, they're making a lot of money out of it. So they should be creating that safety environment. And, it's going to be very much similar to how GDPR came about, is that you will be able to self-report against these networks and they will be fined up to 18 million or 10% of their global profits. So it's in their best interests to be changing the networks, and there's no reason why they cannot change it. In all honesty, which spreads, misinformation, fake news, impersonating people. It's not just about impersonating, celebrities anymore. It's about individuals, and then using that information to social engineer and infiltrate organisations. We are all at risk of this, and so it's really important to protect your personal brand, really.
So I think that's a really, I mean, first of all, it's obviously a really sort of shocking, deeply disturbing story. So I appreciate on a personal level that must have been awful. I mean, I'm just trying to think about. I mean, obviously, it's a really complex area. I mean, 10% of the fee. I mean, that's 4% of the fee was GDPR. So it's really great that they're pushing that up, because obviously that's a lot of money that they don't want to get fined. I mean, when we're talking on Let's Go about our influencer marketplace, and we're making sure that the influencers claiming their profiles are who they say they are, they might have 2 Twitter profiles, or they might have 2, one LinkedIn and 1 Twitter. We want to make sure that they're the same person. That's quite a complex thing. When you can create 15 different Twitter profiles with names that could be play names, not aliases, not your actual exact aliases, and then pulling images from the web and then just creating an email address and backing that up. I mean, it's it's a massive challenge for organizations. And I mean, I guess your story shows that it's not just the celebrities, because I hadn't actually heard of anyone that had their identity stolen there. But I mean, it's if it's coming more mainstream, then I mean, maybe it's not. Maybe it's because you were LinkedIn top voice that you were targeted. I don't know. But it is a challenge for us when we're talking about 10,000 people, or up to 1 million. But when you have 500 million plus users with maybe up to 15 accounts that they could create each, it's massively challenging.
Yeah, I think it's because email addresses, you only need an email address, don't you, to attach there. And then, of course, the email service providers, they don't do any verification either. So it's not just the social networks that are at fault here. It's also, those that enable. So it's like a whole chain, isn't it? It's a whole ecosystem, really, when it comes to this. And I mean, I was fortunate. I had contacts at LinkedIn and could get this resolved relatively quickly. But, normal people, they spend weeks trying to sort this out, and it's very distressing for them. And ultimately, the networks, these technology providers, have a responsibility. And, unfortunately, with the online safety bill, they didn't accept the online verification and making sure that it was people had to put sort of a passport or a driver's license to verify who they are. But there are other ways to verify people as well. Photo ID. So, for instance, the facial recognition. Is this person the person that is creating the account? Very simple to do there. And that doesn't require an ID card. It doesn't require a passport, because there are a lot of people that don't have those things with them for whatever reason that may be. But yeah, there is a lot of work to be done here, and it's only really going to get worse if it's not tackled.
I think also it's about educating employees that this happens, isn't it? Because a lot of employees don't realise that this can happen to people. They do think, like you said, Tim, I think they think it happens to celebrities. It wouldn't ever happen to me. So I think this whole managing your brand is so important, because you don't know who else is out there taking your name and
Exactly.
Impersonating you. It's quite a frightening prospect, actually, that it's coming mainstream, I think. And
Yes.
this is clearly one of your passionate topics then, is it? Social media security. And
Yes, I am the champion of the person that has their identity stolen. But I mean, I've got some tips for people that they can take away today to start really protecting their personal brand. The first thing is to get the domain name with their name, on. So I obviously have zoesands.com. If that's not available to you, get a .co.uk, get a country domain set up, and then put that to an about me page. So then you've got a one web page, very quick and easy, and that's going to cost you less than $100 a year to keep that maintained, and that is like your verification of you, and that nobody then can steal that. The next thing to do is to secure your custom URL on your main sort of social network, so whether that's LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, all of that, using your first name and your last name. Again, secure that. If you have a popular name, you may have to just alter that slightly different to put a number in, or another letter in there, but really taking that, set up a Google alerts on your name. That's going to come through whenever your name is mentioned online. So if somebody posts something publicly on Facebook, you're going to get alerted to that straight away, so that you can start hoovering up some of these maybe not so nice activities that are happening around your name, and then regularly search for yourself on the networks and on Google as well. I wouldn't say every single day and get obsessive about it, but make it an activity at least once a month. When you're checking if you've been paid from work, also check just your name on Google and on the networks, just as it's just some routine really to get it in there, because at the end of the day, you are a brand in your own right, and you need to protect that. Because that's protecting your future and your future career as well. I mean, you don't want information popping up against your name that's untrue and that is fake news about you.
Nice. I think it's so important to talk about the protection of identity, and I totally I hear what you're saying on that. I would love to understand, because obviously that this has come out of someone stealing your identity, and obviously the really importance of correcting that and putting a fundamental solution in place. But I'd love to ask you just a slightly different question. What inspires you in social media? What's your sort of your positive drive at putting the sort of risk aside? Like what topics do you love to talk about, and what are your personal goals over the coming years on how this sort of shows up with who you are?
Yeah, it's a good question, Tim. Although, obviously I've had this negative thing happen, I'm not dissing the networks, because it's my bread and butter at the end of the day, isn't it? It's my money maker. So ultimately, I will continue to use the social networks and the communities, because, it helps with my career at the end of the day. But, ultimately, and why I've been drawn to this sort of career and job, is because it's learning and sharing. And, I see the benefits of information that I find useful, and sharing that, and then creating that in the community, and then getting the feedback from others, and then people saying, oh, that's really useful, thanks for sharing that. And it's that sort of recognition, isn't it, that the information that you're providing is actually helping somebody else. And it goes back to that sort of community aspect, isn't it? It's that peer-to-peer relationship, and creating your sort of own tribe, as Sarah has done with Tribal Impact. It's bringing like-minded people together. And of course, things that I do share may not, always be taken well, or people that are interested in it and stuff like that at the end of the day. So yeah, I suppose that's my take on it.
Oh, so you are quite influential in your own right, Zoe, but
No.
well, probably more than you think. But who influences you? Who do you look at? I'm quite interested to learn about, what do you read? Who do you watch? Who do you learn from?
Yeah. So I don't have anyone that influences me, because I am very strong-minded myself. But what I do is, I might see something that somebody's doing that I think, that's interesting. That's an interesting communication mechanism. Let me try it out. And it's looking all the time, not specifically at a individual, for instance, but just being investigative, looking on the channels, looking in the networks, on the web, and seeing what opportunities that other people are doing, how I can spin that myself and maybe add my own little bit of icing on the cake when it comes to that. So it's all about really looking for opportunities, maybe recycling up something that somebody else has done and actually making it better, trying it out. Sometimes you've got to have that risk and reward at the end of the day, haven't you? You don't know if something's going to work unless you try it, and you've got to be prepared to fail, because not everything that you see or that you think of is going to work at the end of the day. So yeah, it's taking a risk, looking around. I wouldn't say try and mimic other people. Be yourself and be individual, and take the best of what other people have done and leave the rest, and then work your own personal brand, your own company's brand as well, making that individual. Rinse and repeat never works, because you'll never get the same results that somebody else has got, because they are targeting a completely different market to yourself. So I would always say, don't try and rinse and repeat other people. Just take the best and leave the rest.
So, there's a good line.
Yeah, no, I think what comes across is you're very analytical. You seem very considered and analytical. That you're like a sponge, just absorbing all of the best stuff that's happening and then processing it and then personalizing it to how you would use it. And I think that's the great thing about social media, that you can absorb all of the education, and then there's, okay, so what am I going to do with that? And I almost feel like there's a very sort of stupid analogy where at university I used to be late on a deadline, and I used to try and just read other people's, almost like copy their work, but not write what they've written. Just try to get all the best ideas and then go and write my own, because I didn't have a clue where to start.
Tim, should you be like talking about that?
Well, I think
it's on LinkedIn.
It's so long ago. It's 3 decades ago. Like it's okay. I think.
Can you edit that bit?
Yeah, exactly. But I think almost like it wasn't the best approach at university, but almost in social media, you can't come up with all the best learnings, because there's Wikia, there's Reddit. Like everyone's you've got so much support and help, and you're not plagiarizing anyone in a copyright sense. You're just taking all. I mean, you provided some really interesting learnings here. Like Sarah and I might use that for best practice, and say Zoe like came up with a really good idea, but it's the culmination of all of that and then personalizing it that constantly allows you and everyone else to grow, which I think is amazing about social media. And you seem to be doing that extremely well.
Yeah, I agree, Tim. I think you sort of like the rinse and repeat copying. It's just never going to work, because people would just say, I've seen that before, or I recognize that from somebody else. And do you want to be recognized by somebody else's work? No, you want to carve out your own destiny and your own future by being unique. No one wants to be a sheep like the others. You want to have something that's completely different to others.
I think that's what makes a lot of employees a bit nervous, though, isn't it? I mean, when we start talking to them, they're like, "Oh, no one's interested in what I've got to say," and I'm a bit worried I'm going to get shot down because I've said something slightly wrong, or they don't agree. And I think there's a lot of hesitancy around that, because they're a bit nervous about putting themselves out there and experimenting. I've got a question actually about just going back to your LinkedIn Top Voice, and you were regularly creating content, you said. I'm quite interested to know what that was about, and how you stepped into that content creation, from content sharing to moving to actually creating your own stuff. How did that happen?
Yeah, so the reason why I do some of the things is actually to encourage other people to do them in the business that I work. So practicing what I preach, really, because you can't actually sort of advise other people to blog, to write, to do things unless you're actually doing it yourself, and you've got proof that it works for yourself before you can advise others and for others to do it. And people aren't going to do something if they don't see you doing it. So it's very much practicing what I preach, really. And I do see the value in writing, creating that content, whether it's from a video aspect to written to infographics, it's all valuable at the end of the day, but you have to be doing it in order to make a change in your organisation, and if you're not doing it, it's going to be very difficult to make that change.
So practice what you preach.
Exactly.
We've got a few little tips here, haven't we? Oh, hello, Leanne. Leanne's on as well. So nice. Leanne's got a question, actually. Hold on a minute.
I hope it's an easy one, because I can't see it.
It's okay. It says, what would you say to tagging people in your posts to start a conversation? People you know well, of course. Is it good to approach, or could it be misunderstood as someone seeking attention? What's your view?
That's an interesting one, isn't it? So I do find it annoying when people tag me in posts. So you have to think from the individual's perspective, really. I'm being quite, direct and blunt there. But yeah, if somebody's going to use my name, I would want, I think it stems from, the abuse of my name, really. I would want to know in advance that they're going to do that, and I'm more likely to be on board with it when I do see it at the end of the day. So, yeah, and if you don't know the person, never use their name, because you don't know what kind of backlash you're going to do. If you're going to use customers' and partners' name, you need to get permission to do that. So you shouldn't be putting out posts that mention your customers unless you've got the written approval to do that. And likewise, if you're using a channel or a partnership, it's always good courtesy to mention that you're going to do it, really.
Yeah.
Note yourself, don't tag Zoe in.
Yeah. Yes. Exactly. That's it. I think what you're also saying is that if you know that if it's right to do it, if it feels right, then obviously that's okay. I actually tagged a lot of people when I first started posting, because I was trying to bring together a community, and a lot of the people that I had already met and spoken to that I knew had very passionate views on a topic, I wanted to try and galvanize into talking about a specific topic, and that worked really, really well. And actually, I knew some of the people were so busy, they actually scrolled through their social media in front of me, and they only looked at notifications. They didn't look at their feed because there was just too many conversations happening. So a lot of them said, actually, thanks for flagging that to my attention, because I wouldn't have seen it otherwise. So there are people that are very grateful, and then you might tag a few people that never ever engage, and so I dropped them quite quickly because I knew that they probably didn't appreciate it. So I think there's just a balance, but everyone I think that is social says, would you invite some people to a party that you had met at a networking event? You wouldn't put an invite out to someone that you never spoke to at that party, but if you had a 2-minute conversation and got along really well, you could offer it up to them and see whether they're interested. So I think it's a very good question, and it just depends, really. But I suppose if it feels wrong, then it probably is.
Yes, yeah. I think if you've got people speaking at an event and they've agreed to do that, then yes, tag them. But if you haven't, got that relationship with them, then you need to tread carefully, really, I think, to be quite honest. And I think about myself, I've got, quite a lot of few thousand people following me and stuff like that. Can you imagine even if 1,000 people tagged me? It's a lot, isn't it, really? When you start thinking about that, 1 or 2 is okay. But when you've got a lot of people tagging you, it's not fun.
Yeah, so, that's your whole day gone, isn't it? I was just going to ask about your social media routine, and a lot of people who watch these they're trying to get inspired by people who have mastered the process and they understand it, and in more cases it's just been absorbed into their DNA, so they can't compartmentalize when they're on social and when they're not. But do you have a routine? Because we did have a few actually that came to this interview, didn't we, Tim, that said, oh yeah, I do have a routine. I'm on it in the morning with my cup of tea, or what's your social routine? Are you on it at the weekends, off it off it at the weekends? How do you work?
I would say it's all the time, really, but it is my job though, isn't it? So it's very different. In the morning I'm on there straight away because I have to see if there's any alerts that's related to the business that need to be actioned, for instance. I'm also on the news channels as well all the time, because obviously when things break in the news, that can affect our social activity. As an example, for instance, if something awful happens in the news, a terror alert or something like that, we need to suspend our activity. It's not good pumping out messaging when things are happening like that in the world. So it's really having that sort of pulse on there, and you just get into a rhythm of it. I like to have a little lurk on the weekend and see what's going on there and stuff like that. I have taken to taking off my notifications occasionally, because sometimes it does get too much when the phone is just like constantly like that, and it's the psychology of it at the end of the day, isn't it? Because those alerts then prompt you to go on there, and it's not always good to be on there 24/7. You need a break from a mental perspective. Sort of self-care at the end of the day, because you don't want to be broadcast to, or even from a personal perspective, people creating these pseudo social lives that are actually one moment in time and not really reality. So it's down to personal preference at the end of the day. But I would say to people, you know what's good for you and what's enough for you as well.
Yeah, I like it. You obviously live and breathe social media. It's part of it's. What I like about it is just part of your daily fabric. It's not a decision to go on it. It's just there.
Yes.
But I've seen people put red stickers on the apps on their phone that they shouldn't go to more than like twice a day, or like amber. So your people are doing some pretty crazy stuff to actually try and wean themselves off it.
Oh, really?
It's quite funny when you see like a rainbow phone with like, what the hell is that?
I've not seen that.
I'm allowed to go on the green buttons as much as I want, but the red ones, I'm only allowed to go on twice a day. So
talking about kids here, this sounds like
no adults, yeah.
I do that on my kids' tablets. It's like an hour a day. That's it.
Exactly.
It's interesting you said about turning off the notifications. I turned mine off at Christmas. So over Christmas I had a break, and I've not turned them back on, which is a bit of a problem sometimes, because I get my dad ringing me saying, don't you check your phone? But I have turned them off because I found it was just ping, ping, ping all the time. And so it's quite. Do you have yours on then, Tim? Do you have?
Yeah, I have mine on, but I mean, on everything. I mean, I've got 50,000 unread emails, and some people say that would stress them out. I just don't. I ignore them. Yeah.
There you go. So anybody who's watching that hasn't had a reply from Tim. University.
I think this is actually how things are evolving. I see these as news feeds. Your email, your social account, because Zoe, you were talking about social communities being the new email broadcast mechanism. I think everything is blending, and sometimes someone DMs me on LinkedIn, I reply back by email, or I message them on Clubhouse, or spin up a room there, or I forget what it's all like a moving feast.
It's become blended.
Yeah, exactly, and that can stress a lot of people out, and I kind of just miss stuff because it's just like all going so fast, and because it's part of the daily fabric. But I do think there needs to be that cutoff, and if you can't deal with that, you really need a break.
Yes, it's knowing when to get into the stream of content and when to get out, so that you survive really, and that you don't drown, in the flow of information. And at the end of the day, not everything is valuable, is it? Whilst it's on social, just because somebody's published something doesn't mean that it has any of value. It's really in the perception of individuals at the end of the day.
Can I ask just one last question, because I know that we're probably coming up to time, but I just really love to get your perspective on organic reach on LinkedIn. It used to be relatively easy for some people to post videos and get 15 to 30,000 views when they posted a video content, maybe back in like 3 or 4 years ago, or 2 to 3 years ago. Now the same videos are getting probably a 20th of the engagement. I'd love to get your tips, if you've got any, on how to drive better reach engagement on LinkedIn with the changing algorithm?
Yeah. So it's all about the content and the value of the content at the end of the day. Is that content worthy of those views? Because if you're comparing, apples with apples, and you've got one piece of content that worked really well 5 years later, and you want to use the same piece, now, it's not going to work. People have evolved. People want something different. You've got to stay on the cusp of that. I think being in LinkedIn and creating content in LinkedIn, so like on the posts, normal updates, uploading live videos, creating the content in the network is actually going to sort of reinvigorate the algorithm. When you're actually creating content and that it's sending people off the platform, that's when your engagement ducks off, because LinkedIn is not in the business of sending people to another website. They want you in their network. So you need to utilize the tools that LinkedIn has and keep people in the network, because that's what LinkedIn ultimately want to do. So think in the mind of the owner of LinkedIn is Microsoft. Ultimately, they want people to stay within this environment. They don't want you to send them to YouTube. They want you to post videos inside LinkedIn and keep people there. So it's making sure that it's native content natively in LinkedIn, which is actually going to be more successful than posting content that's going to drive somewhere elsewhere all over the place.
Good tip.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome. So I hope that has been helpful for everybody. Look at the video, reach out to me. Yeah.
Yeah. That's been really good, actually. Thank you, Zoe. And I think, there's two new things that have come up for me, Reddit and the security, which we've never had on these chats before. So they're the key things for me. But I've got, lots of tips. So thank you for sharing that. Really good.
You're welcome,
and I think I might close this one, if that's all right, Tim. Normally
of course.
These, can I do it? Yeah. So thank you very much, Zoe. And if anybody who's watching this or watching the recording, if you go to Analytica or Tribal Impacts Resources page, you can see the back catalogue. And we've also got an ebook coming out soon with all the recordings in, which are with all the funny bits as well, with Tim's owning up to his university plagiarism.
Well, thank you. And I think you also asked someone what they're wearing or something like that.
Yeah. Well,
and your kids coming in. So
they're all in there. All the bloopers.
So look forward to those as well.
Oh, that's brilliant. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Zoe. Brilliant. Thank you for your time. Really enjoyed that.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Thanks so much, Zoe.
Take care.